Welcome to Sandy's Paddling Podcast. In today's episode, I get to interview Olympian Greg Barton. Greg has raced at the elite level for decades. He's done sprint, ocean, downriver racing, canoe, kayak, you name it, outrigger. He's done it all. In addition, he's one of the founders of Epic Kayaks. He revolutionized the sport internationally, and he's also one of the nicest guys you'll meet. So without further ado, here's his story. All right, joining me today is Olympian Greg Barton, who's an epic paddler. But we're hoping to get some stories from him. And basically, I wanted to start at the beginning, if you would, of how you and your family got into paddling. Like, what was the progression?
My father started us paddling, or at least gave us the interest. In high school, he grew up in Maumee, Ohio, and there was a little local canoe race they'd have every year. So he and his high school buddy bought a Grumman canoe, and they would race it. And then he moved on to other things and didn't really do anything for several years. And then my older brother, Bruce, when he was about quite young, I want to say like 11 years old or something, saved up money from working on the farm and bought himself a canoe.
At 11?
Yeah, maybe he might have been 10, he might have been, but he was quite young, younger than you would think. You know, it was a couple $100 canoe in those days, and it was this basic aluminum canoe. But
And that was in Michigan.
yeah, it was in Michigan. He thought it was kind of cool to have. And then our local town had a canoe race. They said, "Oh, let's put on a canoe race." And so my father called up his friend from high school, and they went out and won in this race. I think they were like fourth or something.
Did they borrow Bruce's canoe?
Yeah, they borrowed Bruce's canoe. They borrowed the 11. Bruce is probably 12 or 13 by then, but they borrowed his canoe, and they were like fourth in the race. But my father started getting interested again in canoe racing, and he heard about some races that were going on in Michigan Canoe Racing Association. And so he went and watched a couple of them and saw that they had a mixed couples division. And so he and my mother started racing in the mixed division.
And had she ever paddled before, or was that
Not
the
really.
first?
I think as a family, we had done a little bit of paddling, and then we ended up buying more canoes. We had just the one, and we bought a second canoe, and then we could go on canoe trips as a family. We'd go up to Upper Michigan or Canada or various places and canoe trips for a week. And then they started racing. And my brother got his friend, Mark Reimer, to go on a marathon canoe race with him in the junior division. And then I wanted to race. And then my sister jumped in. And pretty soon we were all paddling.
And was your sister the youngest of the family? Or
Yeah. Bruce is my brother, my older brother. I'm the middle child. And then my sister Connie is the younger one.
Wow. And even your mom and dad were all in it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I guess it was kind of a family thing that everybody did.
Yeah, it was a family thing. And then after 5 or so years, my parents kind of stopped racing. They continued to do canoe trips and paddle for fun, and the rest of us carried on.
And when did you transition from canoe to kayak? Was that early?
That was pretty quick. I had done a little bit of canoeing on and off, and then I did my first race at age 10, and our family had met Marcia Jones Smoke, who was a bronze medalist in Olympic kayaking. She was at one of these, she was doing some marathon racing for a season, and they met her, and she introduced us to kayaks, and we bought this training kayak, and I paddled that, and then did my first kayak race later on that year.
Interesting. And how old were you?
I was 10 years old.
You were 10. Wow,
Yeah.
That's amazing. So from there, did you just get serious right away about paddling, or was it kind of a for fun at first and then?
Yeah, it was for fun, but within a couple of years, I think I saw that Marcia Smoke had gone to the Olympics, and there are a few other people and were winning these big marathon races, and I thought that was really cool. And I said, well, one of these days, I'm going to go to the Olympics.
And I read the Barton mold, and you mentioned in there that you were doing 2-a-day trainings like at 12 or 13. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think even at age 11, I went down. Marcia had a group of kids that she was coaching in Buchanan, Michigan. That was about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive from our house. But she invited Bruce and myself down to stay with her for a week or two, and stayed at her place. And we did, twice a day, did morning workout, afternoon workout, and she'd go out and coach us, or her husband Bill Smoke would coach us, and that was it wasn't year round, but it was.
Mhm.
And then I got back, and I was paddling during the summer pretty much every day, and the winter got cold, so I do other sports then.
Yeah. How far away from the river did you live?
We
Or
had
was it a lake
we
or
had a couple of lakes and a couple of rivers, all within anywhere from 3 to 10 miles, depending how far you wanted to drive.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah, that was pretty convenient.
Well, cool. When did you get your first like real K1?
I got my first K1 when I was 11. So I got that, and it was kind of heavy. And then the next year, the Olympic trials, when I was 12, I went and watched those, and I bought another one from Mike Johnson, who made some pretty good fiberglass boats. So I got a fiberglass Ranger from him and paddled that for several years.
Cool. So you didn't start with a kid's kayak, you just went straight to a
Well, we had the beginner kayak, the kind of it was a Slender, which was a Danish design for entry level, and so I paddled that for probably close to a year,
Mhm.
and then I'd paddled. There were some in between kayaks that other people had that I'd paddled a few times,
Mhm.
and then I just jumped right into a racing kayak, and I think it really helps starting at a young age like that because you pick it up much quicker. Your center of gravity's lower, you learn faster, and I can see it in sprint kayaking anyway. Not so much marathon canoes, but in sprint kayaking, oftentimes you can tell the people that picked it up at a young age, they just look like more at ease and more natural. And I think that is a big advantage in the tippy sprint boats. To start,
Interesting.
the earlier you can start, the better off.
Yeah, yeah, get that muscle memory early and then you'll keep it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Huh. What kind of paddles were y'all using?
The first paddles were wooden. I started out with, I think the first one I had actually had a fiberglass shaft with wooden blades. Was a Lundell out of Scotland. And then I got a Struer blade. Was Danish. There's another brand, Limonette. Those were kind of the popular blades, but all wood, pretty flexible,
Pretty heavy.
and pretty heavy, pretty big blades. They weren't wing blades yet.
Mm.
And then a little bit later on,
Not kid-sized.
no, they did have a men's and a women's size, they called it. And since I was a guy at age 11 and about 75 pounds, I got the men's size, which was just way over. I think it was I think it might have been it was either a 216 or a 218 in like this huge blade, which is
Oh,
way too
wow.
big for me, but I paddled with it anyway. I didn't know any better.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
eh,
So, but Bruce was also doing K1 at that time, right?
yeah,
He was
yeah, he was doing K1, and it really helped having him sort of leading the way because Bruce, when he was I don't know what age, like maybe 16 or something, he and one of his friends went to Europe by themselves with no adults. And I think his friend was a year older or something, so he was like 16, 17. His friend might have been 17 or 18, and they just hopped on a plane and went over to Europe and paddled. I think with some of the Dutch paddlers, and went to Germany and did some races
oh,
and did that all on their own. And then he went to the junior world championships before me, and then there was a year where we were both on the junior team, and he made finals in two events and finished sixth place. And I thought that was pretty cool because at that time it was really rare for Americans to make finals in any kind of big international event. And I said, wow, if he can do it, I can do it.
yeah, that's really neat that
Yeah.
you had a brother that. Now, did you race K2 with him at all, or?
Yeah, we raced at that age. I was kind of small for my age, and so we did do some K2 racing.
Mhm.
At the World Championships, the Junior Worlds, he got another partner that went a little bit faster. But we did also race later on. We raced trials together at the 1980 Olympic trials, which we both qualified for the team and then boycotted.
Oh, that's
So
right. That was the year of the boycott.
yeah, yeah, that was when Soviets invaded Afghanistan, so we boycotted their Olympics.
How do you think y'all would have done at that Olympics?
I did quite well that year in some of the international races. I was, I think, seventh at a big race in England, Nottingham, England. Although I got confused by the buoys and stopped a little early.
Oh no.
And the next weekend in Germany, I finished second in an international race. There were a few of the top guns weren't there, but I think I had a good shot at making the finals. I looked at the results, and I think the eighth and ninth place finishers in the Olympics I had beaten at earlier in the year. So I certainly would not have been in the medal contention, but had a shot at the finals.
And what was your training like during that time?
It was pretty rigorous, the training. I went down, let's see, that year I was in college. I think I was a sophomore in college, so I took a semester off and went down to Florida for a couple months. Andy Toro was the coach down there, and we were doing 2 days, and we built a makeshift outdoor gym and would do weights and get out in the water. And so it was pretty rigorous train. It really helped having extended time both on the water and with some coaching.
When I read the Barton mold, you had he included your notes on your training, and it seemed to me like you would balance your weightlifting with kayaking in the winter, almost maybe not 50-50, but you did quite a bit of weightlifting, and then as summer rolled around, you diminished the time you spent weightlifting and did a lot more kayaking. Is that kind of, I mean, I guess, where were you living?
Yeah, I was living primarily in Michigan at the time.
So it's cold.
It was cold, and then a little bit later on, before the '88 Olympics, I'd moved to Newport Beach, California, and was training there. But it was sort of two reasons, especially in Michigan when the water froze and it was really cold outside. It was convenient to work out in the gym, and it also worked. I think that's a good balance to do a lot more weight training in the wintertime in the off season because you're trying to build strength.
Hmm.
And then as you approach the main season, you want to cut back because you want to put your effort on the water. And if you're training heavy in the gym, you're tired out, your muscles are sore, you're not putting as much energy into your on water training. So as the season went on, I would do less and less in the gym and more intensity on the water.
You also did a lot more running than I was expecting in your logs.
Yeah, at that time, running was a pretty big part of sprint training, and most paddlers did some running. And so, even though I was born with club feet and had surgeries and ended up with one leg shorter and limited ankle mobility, I would still go out and run. And I even ran a couple of years of cross country in high school. Not all that successfully, but we had a good team, and I was not one of the better ones. But it was fun. We had a good coach, which helped, and I did a fair amount of running.
Do you think
Eh,
that coaching experience helped you in like training for the Olympics and having discipline and training or?
I think it did. I think it helped having. I mean, every coach that I've had, the good ones especially, I've picked up a few things that stuck with me, and I think that's what it takes to be a winner.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you definitely had discipline. You in your training logs, you were training a lot of hours, or well, you counted it in minutes per week, but you were very detailed in your and but that was before the time of heart rate monitors, you just had to guess on your uh output levels of energy.
Yeah, yeah. There's no heart rate monitors, speedometers. Well, certainly no GPSs. A
Hmm.
little bit later on, I did get a yachting speedometer, which I drilled a big hole in the bottom of my boat and stuck this little
Oh,
impeller
was it
in
a
it.
little, yeah.
And so I had that information, but the feedback that we had was pretty crude. But I did try to document what I was doing. I
Hmm.
think I started that when I was about really detailed when I was about 23, 24. I started to write down every workout I did. I would write it down and I'd add it up at the end of each week and at the end of each month, and then keep a running tally at the end of each month for the year. And so I could see how much I was paddling, how much time I spent in the gym, how
Hmm.
much running or other sports I was doing. And I think it's good to do that because it really keeps you honest. What I've saw is people say, "Oh yeah, I train every day," and then you say, "Well, what about Tuesday? You went shopping. Oh, that's right. I guess I took Tuesday off. And then what about Thursday? You did this. Oh yeah, I guess I didn't train on Thursday either, did I? And then they added up at the end of the week. They actually only did maybe 3 or 4 sessions during the week, even though in their mind they thought they were training every day. And so it really gives you that feedback to see how much am I training, and both from a undertraining standpoint and an overtraining standpoint as well. If you start seeing the hours climb really high and you're not feeling good, well, maybe you're overtraining.
How do you think the invention of all the resting scores and things like that on your GPS and heart rate, how do you think that's changed the sport from the days when you didn't have any of those tools to now? Do you think that's made the times faster or?
I think that data is definitely helping, and I
Mhm.
think it will help a lot more in the future as it becomes more optimized. Again, when I was younger, it was just mostly by feel or what you thought you'd put down. Like I say, well, I could time how long I paddled, and I'd say,
Mhm.
okay, I paddled for an hour and 15 minutes, and kind of guess at what my average speed might have been, and said, okay, maybe I paddled 13 or 14 kilometers, and so I'd put that down as my distance. And now we know exactly how long we paddled. We know what our speeds were at different times. It's really good for analyzing if you're trying to be consistent in your workouts, if you want to be going as fast at the end as you are at the start. Certainly, the resting and recovery is a good tool. I don't think it's optimized at this point. I think it varies a lot from person to person. And I wouldn't necessarily say that those things are 100% accurate.
Do you think it might be hindering athletes because they rely on it so much now?
It can be a positive and a negative, and I think you need to shut that out. If your sleep score is down or your heart rate variability is not what you think it should be, don't let that psych you out for the race.
Mhm.
And but it does. I found following those, and I don't know. I think a lot of it's because I'm getting older now, but I find that I have to take a lot more rest days than I did when I was younger, and I don't know if I was overtraining then or more likely I was just younger and recovering a lot faster. But I really notice it now that if I train really hard 2 days before a race, my race is lousy. I really need those a day or two of easier off if I'm going to perform at a high level before a race, much more than it seemed like I used to, and the numbers seem to correspond to that. I can see if it says, "Oh, you need 72 hours recovery," I'm probably not going to race very well the next day.
Mhm.
And if my heart rate variability has been very low for several days in a row, that usually corresponds with heavy training, and I'm probably not going to race well unless I have at least a day of rest.
Oh, did you have any, like, people that you really admired that you looked up to and kind of followed their lead besides obviously your big brother, but, um, like other Olympians or people that really had an influence on your racing?
I mean, yeah, early on, I mean, obviously Bruce was someone that I looked up to, and it was good because I could, he would go to Europe and come back and tell me what the other people were doing. And so
Mhm.
it was, even though I wasn't there myself, I had an idea. And I realized too that being the fastest in America is a lot different than being the fastest internationally. And he,
Or even on the podium internationally, you know?
yes, and so that made a big, yeah. There was some like, early on, like some of the marathon racers in Michigan when I was 9 and 10, following my parents around. We had Ralph Sawyer, Big John Baker, the Kellogg brothers. Those were kind of the local heroes.
Mhm.
And then paddling, I started obviously Marcia Smoke. I looked up to her because she'd gone to the Olympics, won a medal, been in a few more finals. Andy Toro, another coach of mine, was an Olympic medalist from Hungary that came to the U.S. And then I started looking at the people that were winning internationally because they're really, and at that time, the U.S. didn't have a strong team. And so I started looking up to guys like Rüdiger Helm from East Germany and Vladimir Parfenovich from Soviet Union. They were dominating as I was coming up, and I wanted to go as fast as they were going.
Were they really tight-lipped on what their, training was like, or could you kind of get an idea on what you needed to do to progress to their level?
Yeah, I spoke to both of them, but most of the time that I spoke to those two was after they had retired from racing. And at that time, I think things were starting to open up a little bit. The wall was either coming down or
Yeah.
getting close to it, so they weren't as tight-lipped about it. And one of the guys, Einar Rasmussen from Norway, he'd won the world championships in K2, 1000, won a couple of 10K races, and so he liked to talk a lot, and so I had always, my brother had met him on one of his trips and introduced me to him when I was, I think, 18, and so I got to know him, and we'd always talk, and he was always telling me about how he trained, and he was doing some playing around with wing paddle shapes, and it was fun to listen to him and get a lot of good feedback from him.
And when did you start going internationally to race? Or did you do training camps before you started racing internationally, or
My first big international race was at age 15. I went to the Junior World Championships in Italy. And then 2 years later, I went, actually, and that was where I was in the K4. I think I weighed about 90 pounds.
Mhm.
And we went out in the rapid charges, which is we lost our heats and then lost the next round. And then we watched the rest of it. But that was where Bruce made 2 finals and had good finishes. And I saw that. And then 2 years later, I went on another junior team to France. And the next year at age 18, I was on the senior world team. And so I went to the world championships. So I was competing pretty much every year from there on out, someplace internationally.
Wow, that's a lot of travel time.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot of time in the air, a lot of time in foreign countries.
Yeah. And where did you go to college?
University of Michigan. So I was
Okay.
an engineering major at U of M.
So you were still doing most of your training once the snow thawed.
Yes, yeah. So I was fortunate that Andy Toro had gone to the engineering school at U of M, and he found me. There was a group of forestry majors that had a cabin down on the river, and they had a shed with boats in it. And he said, "Hey, contact these guys. They'll let you store a boat there." So I stuck a K1 in there, and after class, I'd ride my bike down and take the boat out and paddle. But you really have to be dedicated uh, to do that because there was no coach, there was no, it
You
was
didn't have any
it
training
was just
people
on me.
around you.
It
Yeah.
wasn't like somebody was expecting to meet me down there, and if I
Hmm.
felt like blowing it off, then I could. It was up to me if I wanted to get down there, and I see that now with a lot of kids. Their training really falls off when they go to college, and it's understandable. I mean, I sacrificed a lot too. My social life was
But
not
you probably didn't go
what
out and
I
hang
wasn't.
out with friends.
Yeah,
You were
I wasn't
paddling.
out partying late at night with my buddies because I was getting up early to train the next morning, and so I sacrificed some of that. And for me, it was worth it because I wanted to go fast.
And you had a hard major too. You were, you did engineering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
mechanical engineering. So yeah, between studying and training, I didn't have too much time to get in trouble.
Although you got a perfect score on the SAT math, which I still find shocking. I don't know too many people that made a perfect score on any part of the SAT. But you said it was easy. Um, so how old were you in 1980 when y'all would have gone to the
I was 20.
20?
Yeah,
Okay. So you're
yeah.
almost done with, so you were out of college by 1984, the second Olympics.
Yeah, well, I took a semester off before the 80 games, and then I took another semester off. I got chronic fatigue for a while. I don't know if it was overtraining or what happened, and I wasn't feeling good, so I ended up taking another semester off. And then at the end, I had a few classes, so I ended up graduating in December of '83, and then that allowed me to go right into training
Is that
for
when
the
you
'84.
moved to California or?
I was still in Michigan at that time,
Mhm.
so yeah, I came back after graduating and worked for a month or so on the farm, and then went down to Florida and trained down there until the Olympic trials were held.
Okay. And when did you win your first world championships?
My first world championship was in 1985 in the 10K.
Okay.
So my first medal was in the Olympics in '84, was bronze in the K1 1000,
Yeah.
and then the following year, I think I was sixth in the 1,000 meter event. The '84 Olympics were a little bit because the Soviet Union boycotted our games as well as East Germany, most of the Eastern Bloc, other than I think Romania and Yugoslavia still came, but a lot of them. But
Okay, so some of the top guys weren't there.
yeah, I mean, I did beat most of the others, so I may or may not have won a medal if they'd
Mhm.
all been there. The next year, I was uh, working a bit and didn't train quite as hard, so I was sixth in the 1,000, but won the 10K. And yeah, then it was I think 2 years later in '87 when I won the 1,000 meters at the Worlds and also won the 10K that year. And at that time, certainly the 500 and 1,000 meter events were more prestigious, though they were more competitive than the 10K. So
Mhm.
my primary training and goals were in the shorter distances, and uh,
That was an
the
afterthought.
10K was more of an afterthought, although I did, from my marathon canoeing background, I think I'm more of a natural endurance athlete. I did do very well in those 10K events.
I don't remember which one it was, but I should have made a note of it. In the Barton mold, it said that you were out doing what you called endurance paddling more than anybody else before one of the Olympics, but I don't remember if that was the 88 Olympics or it might have been the 92. But I was going to ask what that was. Or easy paddles. I think you said you were doing more longer, easier paddles, but it didn't say what that entailed. Like if that was.
Yeah, right before the Olympics, I don't know that I did necessarily longer paddles, but I did continue to do some training. Like some people will take a week almost completely off. And I felt like I felt technically better if had time in the boat.
Did you
And
taper at all, or did you just kind of stay
I
consistent?
definitely tapered. Like my volume probably went down to half,
Mm-hmm.
and my intensity went way, way down. But I was still getting out on the water and paddling because I just felt like my technique was crisp, and I just felt more efficient if I was in the boat leading up to the big races. So I did cut way back on uh, volume and intensity, but still wanted to get out on the water.
Hmm. And which Olympics do you think you trained the most for? Or was it all pretty much the same every year?
I think I trained pretty similar volumes for all Olympics. I definitely upped it a notch on the Olympic years compared to other years. I sacrificed things. I would go follow the warm weather. I would go to training camps and take time off from either college or work and put more effort into it on the Olympic years as opposed to the others. But I did train really consistent even on the off years. It wasn't like I was taking them off. I was still
Well, you were still
trained.
winning the world championships,
Yeah,
towards late 80s.
yeah, I was still podium in the worlds
One might say
uh,
you were dominating the sport.
and I think that is important. A lot of people think that you can train for 6 months and go to the Olympics and win a medal, and it's usually a decade-long process to get there. Uh, and you every year and it's also diminishing returns. If you're 10 seconds behind the winners, maybe you can make up 5 seconds the next year, and then you make up 3 seconds the next year, and then you make up 1 second, and then you make up a half a second, and it becomes harder and harder to get those last tenths of a second.
Hmm. Um, so let's talk about the 1988 double gold. What I think is so cool is that it was just a day apart, or no, it was an hour apart,
There's an hour and a half
hour and a
between
half
the events.
between the events.
Yeah, so
That's wild.
the first race in the morning was the K1 1000, and then they had, I'm not trying to think, I guess they were, and they had the C1 men and the K1 women, and then yeah, I think they were maybe a half hour apart were the events. So, and then they came back to K2 men, so it had an hour and a half
And what made you
from one.
pick the 1,000 as your event?
That seemed to be physiologically, I think I'm well suited to that distance. Certainly, the 500 meters, I was good at it, but not great. I was the times when I was finishing on the podium in the 1,000 meters. I think I would have been a borderline finalist in the 500, but we had other paddlers, Norman Bellingham, Mike Herbert, some other paddlers that were faster over 500 meters than I was.
And did you,
And,
well, you did the K2 with Norman, but did you train together with the 500 guys a lot, or?
Yeah, we all train together as a group. So the 500 and the training for 500 meters and 1,000 meters is not that much different.
Mhm.
And a lot of people would race both distances.
Mhm.
And so I did similar training to the 500-meter guys, but I was just more naturally suited to the longer distance.
Pretty fun. Yeah, you have some great Mike Herbert stories.
I think anybody that spent time with him has some great Mike Herbert stories. So you'll have to get him on your
I know.
podcast one of these days.
If we go back to the Chattajack, I'm gonna see if I can get him to do it. Uh, it was really close in the 1,000 meter, the gold for you in the K1, right? It was like.
Yeah, when in the race, you come across a line, and oftentimes at that level, usually when you hit the finish line, you always look across and see what the guys are doing on either side. Because the last bit of the race, you're not looking at all. You're focused completely on the finish line. And usually, you have a sense of where the other boats are, but you don't really know if you're even ahead or behind. So I looked over, and I thought I had won it, and my coach Paul Pogorski was jumping up and down saying I'd won it, but it was really close. And then when the officials initially ruled, they had me second. They said that Grant Davies, the Australian, had won it, and I knew that the results were off because they had him beating me, I think, by a little over a third of a second.
Mm.
And I knew it was closer than that. I said, "There's no way," because that's about a third of a boat length. I said, "There's no way he was a third of a boat length ahead of me." So
How many lanes over was he from
he
you?
he was he was in lane 1 and I was in lane 8, so he was way over. So
Oh,
I really didn't see
yeah,
him,
you couldn't really
and
see
I
him.
didn't really concentrate on him at all during the race because he was not one of the favorites. And Ferenc Chipes from Hungary was in lane 9 right next to me. Him and then Andre Werleby from East Germany was in the middle of the course, I think in lane 5. So those were the two that I was most concerned about because I knew that they would be the toughest competitors, and so I was really watching out for them. And then uh, um, Davies had a great race and almost got me.
Yeah, I saw it took 10 minutes to deliberate to decide on the. That had to be a long, long time to wait for the results.
Yeah, well, immediately jumped into K2 after the race
Oh, you
because
did. You didn't even wait for the.
no, what happened the year before in the World Championships, I raced the same two events and I won the K1. And when you in those races, when you finish, they weigh your boat because the boats have a minimum
Right.
weight, and they check the length and the width beforehand. And they figure you're not going to change those, but you could take a weight out of your boat. So they motion you in as soon as you cross the finish line. And I went in, gave my boat, and then just stood there on the dock. And I had all this lactic acid in my muscles and my bloodstream. And then when I went back out for the K2, we paid the price for it. That I really faded at the end of the race, and I think part of that was because I didn't properly warm down after the K1. So in Seoul, Norman Bellingham, my K2 partner, was sitting at the finish line with the K2, and I came in, jumped out of my K1, and went straight into the K2 and went out warmed down for about 10 minutes. And then when I came back, they actually lined us up to march out for the medals with Davies in the gold medal position and me in the silver.
Oh, so you had the
And
medals between the races?
yeah, the ceremony. So then, just as they were getting ready to march out, they came. Okay, you guys need to change places. The U.S. is first.
Oh, oh man. I bet that was disappointing for him.
Yeah, it was. I could just
Heartbreaking.
see the disappointment on his
Yeah,
face. It was
but really
eh,
thrilling for you.
yeah.
um, so how did the race go with Bellingham?
We were behind most of the race, which we knew that was the other thing that happened the year before is we went a little bit too hard in the first 500. And after I'd gone that hard in the K1, we figured it was better to pace it out a little bit more and try to conserve my energy for the last half of the race. And so mid race, I think the New Zealanders probably had a boat length on us. The Australians were right next to us. They had a boat length on us. We were probably third or fourth halfway through the race. And then we had a good put on a good sprint the last 200 meters. I think we'd already caught the Australians by then, but we caught the New Zealanders in the last 100 meters or so. And it wasn't a photo finish, but it was still close. I think it was like I don't know 2 or 3 tenths of a second.
Oh, that is
Yeah,
close,
yeah. So it was
but good enough.
yeah.
Now, had he raced that day in the 500, or had he not raced at all?
No, in Seoul that was his only race was the K2 with me. So he was fresh.
Yeah,
So
that probably
that
helped.
was good.
Yeah. Were you bow?
I was in the front.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then after 88, you continued to win worlds, right?
Yeah, I didn't. That was the last time I won the K1. I won a couple of.
No, I mean like world champ. Oh, in.
I won a couple of 10Ks, and but I took a year off. 89, I didn't compete at the World Championships. I still did some racing, but did not quite at the same level.
When did you
And
meet your wife?
I met her actually in '89 as well. So yeah, after the
Right,
Olympics. Yeah,
correlation.
yeah. And so I did some other things and still did some racing and training, and then went back in '90 and I podium. I won medals in the 1,000 meters and I won some 10Ks, but the last 1,000 meter gold
K1.
was in '88 for me.
So that was in Seoul. And then the next one was in Barcelona in 92.
Yeah, Barcelona was '92, and I raced the same two events again, and was bronze in the K1. It was a good race. There was Knut Holman from Norway, Clint Robinson, and another Popescu from Romania, and myself with 200 meters to go, it was almost even with the four of us, and so any one of us could have gotten it. But Clint Robinson pulled it off, and I ended up in third. And then the K2 was a bit of a disappointment. We ended up fourth. We thought we had a shot at being on the podium, and we ended up a close fourth.
Was that also with Bellingham?
Yeah, that was with Norman Bellingham.
You were completely doing sprint at this point. You didn't do any other types of paddling, right? Or was there other things mixed in?
I did a little bit of paddling during that time and other types of paddling. I did a few marathon races. I did some outrigger races. Did the Molokai outrigger a couple of times. I did my first surf ski race was in '89. It was a Molokai race. That was my first surf ski race.
Oh, that's
So
quite the
yeah,
first.
I went for the big one.
Yeah,
But I'd been over and done the Molokai 6-man outrigger race a couple of times with Offshore Canoe Club, and I paddled some surf skis. Marshall Rosa would lend us skis after the race, and we'd go out and play around in the waves and get dumped off. And so I heard about this Molokai ski race, and I thought it would be fun to do. And I thought, well, I'm a good endurance paddler. So I ordered a surf ski from Tommy Connor on Oahu and had him ship it to California and paddled it a bit and went over there thinking that I could stay with the best and got absolutely
Oh no.
trounced. the, I my whole psychic had always been go from point A to point B in a straight line at a steady pace as fast as efficient as you could.
With
And
the same stroke rate, probably.
paddling on the ocean is completely different. You're sprinting, you're backing off, you're turning, you're doing all these things that I really wasn't used to doing at all. So that was a big eye opener to me, and I realized that there was a lot to learn to become a good surf ski paddler.
Is that kind of what got you hooked after that? You were like, I want to do more of this? Or
Yeah,
was
yeah,
it?
I wanted to do more, and then I did going into Barcelona in '92. I kind of backed off on those other types of paddling, and then after that was after my final Olympics in Barcelona, I started doing more, did a little more marathon canoeing, and really got into surf ski paddling.
When did you, at what point were you making the, what's it called? We owned one actually. The Black Buck, was that what it's called?
Yeah, it was initially Black Buck, and then just became Barton Paddle Company.
Yeah.
I was doing that after the '84 games. I did that for a couple of years. Started up this little company in Michigan and made it was one of the first carbon fiber marathon canoe paddles. So I was making those, and then I got an offer from an engineering firm in Southern California that allowed me to train in warm weather, and they gave me a flexible work schedule where I could work. Uh, I could work 6-hour days and do a morning and afternoon session, and I could also take a couple months off in the summer to compete. And so I left the paddle business at that time and moved out to California.
You revolutionized paddles with the carbon fiber invention.
So I was, I think there were a few, but I think that really when my paddles came out in marathon canoe, and I did the same. I made my own paddle in the '84 Olympics, and also the '88. The wing paddles had just come out in '85. I bought a couple from Sweden, which they proceeded to crack on me, and they were heavy. So I made a couple of my own and used them in the '88 games.
Wow. That's neat. Were they fixed length?
No, there was some of the first adjustable paddles. The '84 was a fixed length paddle, but '88 was the original Swedish shape wing paddle, and paddles oftentimes got broke. They're a pain to travel with full length, and so the original adjustment system, I had a hole going through it and a little pin that I would stick in and tape it around, and I had a series of holes so I could change the length. So it made it much more convenient for traveling. And it also, was able to change the length between the K1 and K2 events, use the same paddle, but just I shortened it up a couple centimeters for the K2.
Oh, that's very cool. I guess nobody else was doing that.
Yeah, no, at that time, I think I had the only adjustable paddle at the Olympics that year.
Did people steal your idea after they saw it?
Not really. It took a while for the adjustable paddles to catch on. And then a few years later, when I started Epic paddles, we had an adjustable system, a little bit different than the current one that we use. And that's when it really started to become more popular worldwide, that a lot of there's a few different methods that started getting used for connecting the paddles. But I think now most at the
Yeah,
elite
that's the
level.
standard.
Yeah, you don't see many fixed length paddles anymore. It's just so much more convenient. You can change the length on it. You can change the feather angle. They travel so much easier, and it really makes sense to. It's a small weight penalty, but it's in the middle of the shaft, not out of the blades where it's moving a lot.
Mm,
Yeah, I could go on for hours. It kind of depends on where you want. I could
I
talk
know.
about
I know.
marathon canoeing, surf ski paddling, outrigger paddling,
I know,
making
it's
boats and
everything.
paddles. There's a lot of stuff, or just racing.
Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of.
yeah. When did you race with Serge? Or how did you even, I guess you're a Michigan guy and he was coming down for the ensemble. Is that how you met him?
Yeah, I met him. I think the first time I met him might have been out in Spokane, Washington. There was a marathon race out there. I believe that was in '89 as well. That my brother and I raced together, and Serge was out there. Of course, I knew who he was. He was winning all the marathon races at that time, and I might have even seen him. I'm trying to think if I'd seen him at some races, but we talked a little bit there, and he knew Bruce pretty well because they'd raced against each other. And then actually that summer, the nationals were held up in Wisconsin, and Everett Crozier was sponsoring him. And I was in California at the time. He said, "Hey, will you come back for a marathon race?" He said, "I can set you up. You can race with Serge. I'll loan you a boat." And I said, "Okay." He twisted my arm,
Yeah, how to turn that
and
down.
so we raced nationals together, and we won. I don't know if we were official national champions because he was Canadian. Might have been some kind of world title or
Right.
something. But anyway, so we got to know each other then, and then I went back to sprint racing, and then a few years later we started talking about doing some races together, and then we
Yeah,
raced.
y'all won the Class C.
Yeah, we won. We did the General Clinton and the Classic both in 80 or 96 and 97. So that was a good experience paddling with Surge. It was good because the thing, like, you think somebody like Surge is like a Superman, and you realize that he's a very good paddler, but he's not light years above everybody else. But what I found is he did everything very well. Like
Mm.
he steered well, he paddled well, he trained well, he had good river sense, like where to be in the river. He had good strategic sense, like uh, one year at the General Clinton, we pulled out early into about a 2 minute lead, and then down a couple hours from the end, I think it was Patrick Lynch and Norman Maggie caught us, and I looked, turned around, and there are a couple of boats, and suddenly I take off sprinting. I said, "No, no, no, just calm down." He said, "Let's ride them, let's rest, and then we'll get them at the end." So we rode their wake and traded off for an hour or so, and then we got about 20 minutes from the finish and took off. So that that was certainly, he had a real good race sense of when to go and when to rest, and it's always fun to paddle with other really good paddlers like that because you pick up so many things from them.
Yeah. Were you bow when you paddled with him?
Yeah, I was in the bow yeah. When I was younger, I paddled primarily stern as a
Right,
kid because
because
I
you
was
were
so small. I
smaller.
was tiny,
Yeah.
and I remember I'd paddle with my father, who was about 180 pounds, and I was 80 pounds, and we had this seat. They didn't have flared sterns on them, and so he took the seat
Mm.
and stuck it on top of the gunnels, and I would sit back on the
Oh,
very stern of the boat and paddle with him, and I paddled with other paddlers like that, and then as I got, especially when I was doing a lot of sprint racing and things, and got to be a lot better, then I kind of moved up into the bow. And now as I'm getting older, I may start doing more stern paddling again.
get me back in the stern. No, I think you probably still do well on the bow. Well, I guess I could ask this question. What were some of your favorite races that you've done? I mean, obviously the Olympics.
Yeah, Olympics were fun. Probably my favorite performances were at the '87 World Championships the year before the Olympics, and that was I won the K1000 by over 3 seconds, which is a huge margin at that distance. And in the 10K, I broke away and won by almost a minute. So
Wow.
that was, and as I've always tried to figure out why it's like sometimes you just have this perfect day, like everything's going early. Maybe the day when, like a basketball player, just every shot they take goes in the basket. That was how I felt at that race. And I've tried to figure out, something about the way I peaked both mentally and physically. I just felt like I just had all this energy and everything was going right. And I found that in big races, you always try to peak and have everything the very best, but it rarely is. You're nervous and you get a bad night's sleep, or maybe you eat something that doesn't agree with you, or there's all these things that can happen. And I find, usually on the big day, you're at maybe 97% or 96%, but the guy you're racing against is probably likewise, or maybe even had an even worse day, and he's only at 90%. So it's rare that you're at 100%. But that that weekend, I actually felt like I was 100 or 101%, and I've always tried to figure out what did I do different than
What did I
that.
eat?
Yeah, yeah,
How much did I drink?
yeah.
Did I drink too much water? None. That's cool. What about some of the ocean racing you've done?
Yeah, there's been, I mean, a lot of fun races. I mean, U.S. Surf Ski Champs was fun, and I won the first two of those. But then we started getting more international paddlers coming over, and that was the end of my
I
victories
heard you
there.
almost got run over by a barge in like the first couple that you did.
Yeah, that was in '86. We almost lost like I think 8 Olympic medals because Adam Van Coverdon and I were paddling together. He raced him that year, and we're paddling out. I think under the Golden Gate someplace. I think it's past the Golden Gate. And Adam
Mhm.
says, "Look behind you." And I turn around, and there's this huge freighter just bearing down on us, and we didn't know which way to turn. Like, okay, you go, I go, no, no, let's go right. So we both go right, and we just sprinted as hard as we could. And I think it missed us by about, I don't know, 20 meters or something. It seemed a lot closer than that. It might have been more, but it
Did they
seemed.
ever even see you or
I think they did. I think they were blowing their horn at us. But the thing is that thing was going 3 times as fast as we were, and it was just so big. There's no way it's going to change course. And yeah, I wondered what would have happened if it, would it have, would the wake have like pushed us away, and we could have kind of slipped around it, I mean, certainly we would have come off our boats, but luckily we got out of the way. But it was, yeah, a pretty frightening
that
experience.
does sound terrible. That sounds
I think
very
I think
exciting.
it freaked him out more than me. He still thinks about it.
It's amazing he's had time to say, look
It-
behind you, not just, we're about to get run over. Now, during all this, when did Epic start? Like, what was the progression for?
yeah, well, I'd had the paddle company earlier, and then actually Bob Zavrel from Zavrel Racing Equipment, the guy that was making his blades, wanted to do some kayak blades, and so he contacted me and said, "Hey, um, why don't you make some kayak paddles? My guy can supply you with blades." So I got back into the paddle business, started Epic Paddles, and then made a few wing paddles, started doing the wing paddles. And then I met up with Oscar Chalupsky, and he said, "Hey, we should make this stuff in South Africa." So we went down there and started making both paddles and boats, and that's how it became Epic Kayaks.
Wow. And did you actually make the paddle yourself at first? I mean, you did with the single blades, right?
Yeah, the first paddles I made myself. The first sort of touring shape paddles we did. This company General Composites that made the blades for Zavrel. They made the blades, and then I started making my own shafts initially, and then got outsourced those.
How many paddles a year do you think you were selling at the time?
Well, early on, it was maybe 500 a year or something, and certainly we've grown to a few thousand a year now.
Yeah, it did expand quite a bit. You're kind of the top dog in paddles and surf skis. Um, how did you get more partners in the business, or how did that come together?
That was when I'm trying to remember what year it was. In '99, I came over and raced Molokai, and I had my own wing paddle, and Oscar Chalupsky was there, and he won that year, and he saw my paddle, and he talked me into selling one to him. First, he wanted me to give it to him because he was the world famous Oscar Chalupsky, and I said no. I put a lot of work into this paddle.
You
You're gonna
could
have to
say,
pay
"I'm
me
the
for
world
it.
famous Greg Barton."
so, so I sold him the paddle, and then about a year or two later, I was doing this show in Salt Lake City, this outdoor retailer show, and Oscar just showed up, and he said, "Hey, I'm coming to the show. Can I crash in your room?" And I don't snore, and so I said, "Okay, you can come stay with me." So I'd rented a hotel room there, and so he kind of hung out at the Epic booth, and he's like, "Oh, we can do this stuff in South Africa. Let's do it." And so he got another friend of his to come in, and we had a three-way partnership there for a while.
Okay.
That yeah, with Oscar and First, it was a guy named Martin Deal, and then later on Charles Brand as the third partner in the business.
Okay, I didn't realize that he was like the original with you. That's
Yeah,
cool.
according to Oscar, he started it,
Oh,
so
really?
he, he he was the main mover and shaker. No, I think he says he co-founded it, but which is partially true.
You probably expanded the business a lot.
Yeah, I definitely did because he's certainly much more vocal than I am, and
Hmm.
he was much better at getting the word out there than me.
Good
So
salesman.
yes, it was.
Everyone must buy this.
Yeah, so it was a good partnership in that way.
Now, did you design the first boats as well?
Yes, yeah, I did design the boats and the paddles, and yeah, pretty much everything.
How did was it all computer or did you kind of go by eyeball some and then,
Most of it was computer. Yeah, I was doing stuff on CAD then, so I would draw some things up in various ways. When we were in South Africa, we had this guy Gordon Rowe was one of the famous shapers down there, and so I'd give him some sections, and he could shape the foam the way we wanted it. And then we started going to cutting on a CNC machine to get more accurate.
oh, that's cool. Did you, like, was there a process where you would make it and it wouldn't look quite right and then you would have to adjust? Or did you just time trial? It was the
we,
original
we would do some adjustments. Sometimes we'd do
mold the
multiples,
foam
or
and stuff.
or other times we'd make one and we'd take it out and say, well, it seems good, but it's a little too low volume here. We need to change something there, and we'd go back and make modifications depending on how drastic they were. We could either kind of add or subtract to what we already had, or we just start from scratch and do another one. So we did. Most of them have been pretty close, but we did have a few duds around along the way that we had to make some changes to.
Um, oh, you did the Sella Descent, I saw.
Yeah, I did that. That was in 1980. Instead of we boycotted the Olympics, but we did go over and do a series of races. There was I think we did like I don't know 4 or 5 races in a span of about 8 days over there. I think the Sella was the first one we did, but we did several others as well
What was that
over there.
race like? It
That
looks chaotic.
that was one of the craziest things. I still cannot believe that I made it down that river without swimming.
Were you
Yeah.
K1?
I did K1, and that year, the year I did it was the 50th anniversary of the event. And I guess typically they let the international paddlers start at the front of the pack, but for some reason, because it was the anniversary, they didn't seed international paddlers. They might have let the local Spanish go first, but there was 2,000 boats and they line you up along the river's edge, and
And
so
it's a small river.
yeah,
It's not,
and number 2,000 is probably uh, 400 meters or more behind the leader when the gun goes off, because you're lined up along the last one is way behind the first one. So they had all the K2s were first, and so there were several hundred K2s, and then I think I was like number 273 out of the K1s.
oh,
There was like 200 all the K2s plus 270 K1s ahead of me, and I got into this narrow river, and there was just boats everywhere,
and it's
and
shallow too,
it's,
right?
yeah, shallow. You had a flip up rudder on the back, and people were just getting spun out sideways in front of you. Guys were falling into you and grabbing onto you, hitting them off
Oh,
with your paddle,
my God.
and yeah, and I started doing sprints, because what would happen is there'd be a flotilla of people would converge on you, and you're just paddling off their decks, and then I'd see about a 50-meter opening. I'd sprint as hard as I could, pass as many boats, and then it'd converge on me again. I'm trying not to fall in, and I finally made it up. I actually, at one point, was the solo leader in the K1 class. There were still K2s ahead, but I actually had passed every single K1 paddler. But then a couple of other uh, K1 paddlers caught me by riding K2s that had gotten
Stuck.
into trouble. They'd flipped or whatever. They
Mm.
sorted themselves out, and then these K1s would ride them back up. And so then I packed up with 2 other K1 paddlers, a pack of 3 of us for a lot of the race. And going into the end, the tide had gone out. I found out by talking to the other guys I was with, and we had a choice of either paddling out around this long bend or portaging across these mud flats. And so we got out and portaged, and they both outran me. So I was
Oh,
third.
exciting end, a muddy finish.
Yeah, but that was fun. We did that. I did, yeah, I think at the River Nalone. There was another sprint race I did. I raced a K4 with Einar Rasmussen and I think a couple Canadians, and then yeah, I even did a C2 once. Roland Mullen had made a sit down C2 to ICF specs, and he cut it in half to fit it on the plane and put it back together when we got there.
Oh, wow.
But he raced it in a couple races, and then I did one of the races with Matt Stribe in over there in that boat. So that was kind of fun.
Did you ever do the devices?
I've never done that one. Never raced the Devise.
Yeah, I've never really been interested in that one with all that. It's like equal parts paddling and portaging.
I think it's good on something that long because, and especially like canoes, I can sit a little longer, but I have a hard time sitting for multiple hours on end in kayaks, and so I think it's actually nice to get out and stretch your legs a little
What's the
bit.
longest race you've ever done?
The longest race, it's probably been, well, the 70-48 probably was the long. That was, I think, 9.5 hours. Although a couple years at the Classique was pretty close to that because they used to, I think one year I think went all the way to Grand Mare on the first day,
Mm.
and that was, I can't remember how long, but I think that was right up there, close to 9 hours. The the General Clinton race is, I can't remember. It's like depending on the river level.
That can be like 7 hours,
Yeah, I think
eight
that was, I
hours.
think one of the years it was like up around 8 hours. So yeah, yeah, generally the first day of the Classic, General Clinton, and then the
You
seventy
never
forty
did
eight.
the Texas water
I never did the
slide.
Texas Water Sprite. I never did the Asabo Marathon. So a couple of the
I
ultra
know. I would
endurance.
have thought you would have done the ensemble since you grew up there, basically.
Yeah, that, I think what happened was it just didn't click with the sprint racing that I was doing during my prime. I was heavily involved in sprint racing, and it's if you've had some marathon experience, it's pretty easy to jump into a couple hour race or even stretch that out to 4 or 5 hours. But I think when you start getting up to something that long, you really need to train specifically for it. And I haven't been willing to do that, so I haven't done the super long stuff.
Your big brother did though.
Yeah, yeah, he's done a lot of them.
And then his daughter for sure.
Yeah.
Um oh, who have your favorite paddling partners been along the way?
Yeah, obviously, Norman Bellingham in the K2, my brother Bruce, we've done a lot of good races together. Had some good mixed races with my sister Connie and also Roxanne, my sister-in-law. We won marathon nationals a couple times together. Surge for sure. So yeah, a lot of good paddlers.
Did you ever race with Oscar?
Yeah, I've raced with Oscar. I did um, let's see what I did, the P East London in South Africa. We also did the Doozy Canoe Marathon
Oh,
and
you did the
the
doozy?
Uncle Canoe. Yeah, we did both of those. That was pretty crazy. It was
It's pretty
good.
exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd never done those type of rapids in like especially in a like a racing K2, and I was glad I had somebody
Was he
that
bow?
yeah, he was in the front, so I was glad I had
Steering.
somebody that knew
Yeah.
what he was
You
doing.
just had to paddle and
Yeah,
stay
so
in the
I
boat.
just followed him, although he did end up swimming tops needles at the Doozy, so that was a low point on that one.
Oh no. Did you do that crazy long portage? Isn't there a super long one in that one?
There were several portages in that race. I know that Oscar, like me, he's not the best runner, and so he tried the ones that were optional. We tended to
Stay
shoot
in the
them,
water.
stay in the water.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think certainly the top guys, it's as much of a running race as a paddling race because it's a lot of play. I think you can pretty much it's anything goes. You can make a portage wherever you want,
Right. I think they can portage over the mountain if they want to
yeah,
on some of the.
in certain places it's faster to get out and portage. I mean, some you portage because the rapids are so big you
Scary.
pretty much need to. Others, it's you can shoot the rapids if you're bold, or you can take the chicken road up and over the top. And other times it's faster, especially if you're a good runner, to take the portages.
Did you get to see the course much before that race, or was it just kind of show up and paddle?
I don't remember on that one. I think we just showed up and did it. The Uncomas, I know that we ran part of it. I think we ran the upper portion of that prior to the race. But I think the Doozy, I don't know that we, other than the last little bit, was coming into Durban, which I'd paddled that before. But most of it for me was
Wow,
blind. But
that's very exciting.
yeah.
Very brave of you. At least you had a good steering person.
Yeah, I mean, Oscar had done it. We were actually entered in the celebrity class rather than the main racing division. He'd done it with, I think, a soccer star and Baby Jake, this pro boxing champion. He did it with Miss South Africa, and he had taken a lot of people down that river before. So he was pretty experienced at having inexperienced people behind him in the
Hmm.
boat.
Yeah, and he probably gave you good direction.
Yeah.
This one's going to be terrible. How did your life change after you won medals in the Olympics? Were there a lot of interviews and
I was pretty busy for 4 years between 88 and 92 as, winning the medals. And since paddling is a minor sport, I didn't really cash in like
you
some.
didn't get a Nike
Yeah, I didn't get a big contract. I
contract?
wasn't able to retire and buy a big mansion
Right.
someplace, but I did do some appearances. I had an agent that got me some speaking engagements. At that time, the big thing for the kind of the middle and lower tier sports that weren't the glamour sports was to go to conventions and companies that were having meetings and give a talk and
Mhm.
talk about what it's like being in the Olympics and overcoming obstacles and tell them a funny story about something that happened. And so I did got enough to put a down payment on our first house, but it certainly was not enough to retire on. So I had to keep working. But it was fun. I got to meet a lot of people that I probably wouldn't have met otherwise. So
Yeah, you
it was
probably had
fun.
a lot of opportunities for more racing partners and things like that from it. Like
Yeah, yeah. It's always good
that's a
to.
good opener. I've won gold at the Olympics. But when did you have your girls during this time? Or were they 90s babies or
They were at the tail end of the 90s, our two daughters. Yeah, Haley was born in 97 and Kendall in 99. So I was kind of, I was semi-retired, from my most serious racing was really, 92 was Olympic level racing. And then for another 4 or 5 years after that, I did some uh, pretty big marathon, outrigger, surf ski stuff after that. And then started still competing at the highest level I could, but having more of a balanced life with family and work and all those other things.
sleepless nights with children? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're almost retired, semi-retired
Yeah,
now?
I'm starting to cut back my hours at Epic. So my wife retired about a year ago. And so I'm looking forward to being able to come to Maui more often or go to other places and just enjoy enjoy paddling and doing other things outdoors.
Do you think you'd consider being a coach for the US team?
I don't know if I certainly with Jonas Ecker and Aaron Small, I tried to help them out a bit. We had a group in Seattle that would get together occasionally, and um, just we didn't have a lot to offer, but certainly the door was always open, the phone was always available, and things like probably more things on an informal basis than formal. If canoe coaching was like basketball or football, or I could go to any college in the US or any pro team and earn a seven-figure income, I'd do it in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, there's canoe coaches tend to not be compensated that well in the US. And so, I've made a career out of doing other things. And so
You've done
I
some
think,
canoeing clinics, though.
yeah, I've given clinics and, I think on an informal basis, I'll continue to help some people out that I know. And, but I don't see it becoming a second profession for me though.
You'll have to write a book and
Yeah,
put all the details in the book.
yeah, yeah.
How
Eh,
to. So what do you think is next from here?
yeah, I'm just gonna enjoy paddling and doing things. I'm over here in Maui doing downwinds every day, hopefully doing the Maui to Molokai. I'll go to the gorge this summer. I may do thinking about doing World Surf Ski Champs in Durban. I'll probably be down there this October, and yeah, just having fun with it. And
Yeah.
that's the way I feel now. When I was younger, I would always get really nervous before events, and now not so much because I'd say, well, I've had my glory, and now I'm just in it for fun. And
Mm-hmm.
certainly when I'm out there, if I'm next to you in a race, I'm going to probably try my hardest to beat you. But if somebody ends up beating me, I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm just gonna enjoy it.
Yeah. Any new? Well, you came out with the twist paddle. That's a kind of innovative thing. You
Yeah, yeah, we're always tweaking equipment,
yeah.
little changes in the boat designs and some new paddle designs, and
You need
so
to come out with the
I
foil, the surf ski foiler.
yeah, I know there's been a few that have tried it, and so far I haven't seen any
You'd
success
have
with
to
it.
have
I
an
think
expandable paddle or something. How once you got up
yeah,
there, how would you?
that's well, I've actually paddled a foil kayak before. Now, my buddy Einar Rasmussen from Norway created the flyak, and that
Oh,
was
I
a
have
Sprint
heard of it.
K1,
Yeah.
and it was on flat water. And the problem with that was I think they wanted to make a commercial go of it, but it, it required you had to be an elite level sprint racer in order to get airborne with it. And the market was so small, I don't think it was viable. And the thing with the subfoilers and the wing foilers is they can use the waves to launch them and then go from there. And also they can do a pumping action. I think that's what really hurts the ski is if you watch
It'd
the
be
good
hard to
foilers,
bounce yourself up and
they
down to get.
pump, and I know I think people have tried sliding seats, but it's really not the same. You're not able to put the same kind of force
Mhm.
on the foil that you see these guys pumping with. So I think that's um, yeah, but who knows? Maybe someday somebody will figure it out.
It'd be pretty
Yeah,
exciting. You'd be flying,
literally.
literally. Um, I don't know. Are there any other stories you can think of?
There probably are. I probably should.
You've done so many races,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's
and you've
uh,
been to practically every country too.
not every country, but
Not
a
every,
lot of
but a
countries.
lot of
Yeah,
countries,
lot of countries.
every continent. How about that?
Yeah, not Antarctica. So.
Ooh, nobody wants to go there.
Yeah,
You
but
can't paddle
yeah,
there.
maybe we can always come back and add some things on at the end. If I think of something or you think of something, we can always
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you
either
so
we can
much.
either edit this one or do a version 2 of more things.
If you think of something, we can always. Tonight you'll go, oh man,
I should have said
I should
that.
have talked about. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with me
Yeah, it's
today
been a
and
pleasure.
sharing some stories.
Yeah.
Wait, we'll wait for the airplanes.
Oh,
If they're
is that
super
what that
loud.
Yeah, this thing is really sensitive. You got to tell Carter he's got to get an insulated office
I
here
know,
so it
no
gets the
good for
background noise.
podcasting. Every 5 minutes there's an airplane. It wasn't that bad earlier, but it did try to pause. I was like, just wait a moment.
Yeah, I remember doing something. The Newport Aquatic Center is right under an airport path. And I never thought about it until I
Oh,
did
did
some
they do an
TV crew came out to
interview?
do an interview and they had to keep stopping for the. Yeah.